right, so here's the numbers 1074045, and it's just things that have been in the news the last couple of days. And if you had any questions about them, you can ask, and I can maybe help explain it a little bit. Oops, where did my screen go? There it is. Who's Fearless Possum 69? Um, Anyone else, interest? Oh, so have you guys been looking a little bit at the news when they, explain what some of the business effects are of this crisis? It's sort of noticed on Eglinton, a couple of restaurants are they changed their sign from closed for March to closed and not reopening. So it's definitely hurt some of the ones that were struggling a little bit. Okay, well we'll get started, and you can participate virtually if you're not in the game. So in terms of inflation, like how much prices should go up each year, what's the target for the Bank of Canada? Do they want 0 price increases, 1% price increases, 2%, or 3% increase? What's their target for how much prices that should go up each year? So it's actually the target that they hope for is about 2% each year, because that means the population's growing, people are being hired, people are spending more money. And they want it kind of to be a slow and steady 2% so people know what to expect. But what's happened with this crisis is we're not sure, how much, like, are people going to start spending money again, like in April? Are they going to start spending the money in May or in the summer? And we're not sure what exactly is going to happen to the price level. It could be that the price goes up a lot because we can't supply enough goods on time, or it could be that the price goes down because people just aren't spending money. That was a little bit of economic one. After the first two, it's less economic based. So which of the following have been disrupted? Is it disrupting supply? Is it disrupting demand? Is it disrupting both of them? Is it disrupting neither of them? Yeah, so you guys are right. Getting goods made because maybe the factory had to close, or maybe the shipping's been more complicated. That's a problem. But also because people might be losing their job, or they're not out spending their money, they're also demanding less goods as well. So if you've been following the exchange rate, how much US dollars does a Canadian dollar buy as of yesterday? Does it buy you 70 cents American? Does it buy you 72? Does it buy you 75? Does it buy you 78? So actually, as of yesterday, it was at 72 cents. And is that an increase over the last week, do you think, or is it a decrease over the last week? Has it risen over the last week or fallen? Hmm. So it's risen slightly. That's our economy's doing a little better, a little more positive news than the U.S. economy right now. So Gary and Hayden are up front. So which food delivery app left Canada this week? Foodora, Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, DoorDash. Yeah, even though you might think more people are ordering food, they still didn't feel like it was profitable. So this week they announced they're leaving Canada. So McDonald's, due to supply issues, they've started using uh, imported dairy products, imported beef, imported potatoes, or imported napkins. Maybe you don't know and you just, guess this one. Yeah, they've actually started to import beef because they're not totally positive about the supply chain. And then there's two more. Since since the low in the middle of March, how much has the TSX composite regained? Is it regained 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%? So it's still down big time since the start of the year. But since it bottomed out about a month ago, the Canadian economy, because of some of our energy prices, has regained 30%. And the last one, okay, Kyan and Hayden and Gary are winning right now. Um, this is now the second biggest company in Canada based on market cap, based on the valuation. Which company is now second to RBC in terms of market capitalization? Would you say Canada Goose, Shopify, BMO, or Rogers? Yeah, so it's Shopify. Um, their app, they're introducing a new app. It's gone over very well with the stock market. And so their share price has gone up well. And if you add up all the shares that are out there, congrats to Hayden for winning. He's been following the news a little more closely. Um, so if you take all the shares times the share price, Shopify is our second biggest Canadian company right now. You'd think it might be a bank or Rogers or Bell, but it's actually Shopify. Okay. So I had the chance, I'm going to show you the classroom. I had the chance to sort of clean this up. One of the issues with Google Classroom is it's hard to delete things once they've already been posted. But I went through it and I deleted all the extra stuff just to make sure there's a little less confusion. So I know some of you were working hard on the documentary, and if you still want to submit that, if you still think you can do that, then please feel free. You can still do that documentary if you want. Other people might want to improve their mark in the course, but it's, technically it's a little difficult to do the documentary. I totally understand that. So I've made a culminating activity that you can look at if you want to raise your mark in this class and you don't want to do the documentary. If you think you can get it done, that's fine. I just don't want you to do anything that's a little like, very, very difficult. But if you wanted to make a webinar for this culminating activity, I would be happy to mark that and give you the extra credit for this course. I was thinking, what would you want to do? Um, did you want to say, for example, is there a way you can use your technology skills in this class to improve another culminating? Like if you have a presentation due in English, like did you want to sort of enhance that presentation, using your skills about a slideshow, using your skills about video editing to make a webinar for that class? Did you want to just, make a summary of what you learned during this remote learning period? Did you want to explore a topic of your choice? So if you want to be improving your mark in this class, in terms of the culminating, something that I was thinking that could work for the at-home learning was this new activity that I called Create a Webinar, and then there's some, if you go and log in here. I made a couple of videos how you can use Google Meet to record a webinar. Um, Zoom, it's charges for you to record a webinar, but Google Meet allows you to do it for free. So I was thinking that might work. So if you're wondering, okay, what's going to happen with the culminating, if you put hard work into that documentary, please go and do it. If not, that's sort of the other option right now. Is that kind of is that okay? Like, is that, and then like if there's a way, please, if you think one of your culminatings from another class, needs some technology, like, oh, you have to do this. I don't know what it could be, like you want to show me a video that you're doing for another class and explain how you're using what you learned in BTA about good presentations, good videos, good graphic design. I'd be happy to give you credit for that as well. And maybe we could find a way to make the BTA part of your culminating for another class so you get credit for, your time. Does that make sense what I'm saying there? And if you have any one-on-one questions, you can ask me afterwards. So I'm going to share my screen again. So today's class is a bit about crisis management. So that's generally a business concept, but it's especially a digital environment concept because we like crisis in business can blow up more quickly with social media. Like it used to be, like, if a restaurant had a bad review from a food critic, maybe people didn't read the newspaper. Maybe people didn't care. Maybe they weren't aware that the restaurant had been reviewed. But now, like when Guy Fieri's restaurant in Times Square had a very, very bad review, everyone was posting that. Or if something bad happens, like, if you can recall, when Starbucks had that issue with people, the police being called about people using the restroom, maybe no one knows about that in the past, but now it can be easily shared and it easily blows up and becomes a very, very big deal. So you want to have a plan for crisis management. So I want to stick to my half hour. So this is a kind of a good one video to sort of explain what crisis management is, why it's important. And he talks about one case where it goes well, where he talks about the Tylenol case where they handle it very, very effectively. And he talks about another case where they don't have a plan and the stock price ends up falling. So you can rewatch that video later. It's kind of a good summary of one case that was handled well and one that wasn't. But the key issue is when you're thinking about crisis management is, how can you get out ahead of it? Is there a way to sort of detect issues before they become serious? Like, is there a way, if can you monitor what your employees are doing? Not like you're surveilling them, but just how people feel. Are they feeling pressured? Maybe if they're pressured, they might take a shortcut. Or do they feel good about the company? If they really like working there, they're probably going to act responsibly. How do they treat the customers? Is there a way to sort of just take the pulse of the company before a crisis happens? Is there a way to sort of notice on social media, and I'll show you a couple of apps, when the first complaint is made, before it becomes a major issue? And then try to create your response ahead of time and do a simulation if you can, because it's not if a crisis will happen, it's when. And then again, try to be proactive. The companies that have done the best, especially with social media now that things can circulate, the ones that have done the best are the ones that get ahead of it. So there's a crisis that Airbnb had. I don't know if you've heard of this. Well, we've heard of several things happening with Airbnb, but this is the first major issue that they had. And it was back in June. And so they still were a small company. And, I think since then you've heard maybe of parties or theft or, people putting cameras in there, all kinds of weird things happening in Airbnb places. But they were kind of operating under this pretense that, hey, everyone likes it, nothing's going to go wrong. So what happened was someone in San Francisco, EJ, rented her house. it got trashed. The wallet, the passport were stolen. Things were vandalized. Um, she blogged online, and then it just started circulating, and other people came forward with similar stories. She kind of assumed, because Airbnb didn't let her research and approve the renters, that Airbnb had done so themselves, but they had not. And when she called the support line, nobody called back for 24 hours. So that made things a lot worse, because she was reaching out to the company and they didn't respond. So that would be, a crisis that wasn't handled right away. Why was this important? Well, Airbnb was in a round of venture capitalist fundraising at the moment. Although the story did not get out and hurt anyone from investing, but it could have. Maybe that might have inspired somebody not to invest in them. Competitors began advertising how they had insurance plans and Airbnb didn't. It circulated on social media, although eventually the company did work with the police, and the person who vandalized the house was arrested. It kind of was like that chair girl from Toronto. It was sort of someone of the same age who had these different social media platforms, who was like a 19-year-old who apparently had been doing this to sort of cause trouble and tell people how to scam the system. But that's what happened right away. And then 2 months later, the company, admitted, we've really screwed things up. We didn't know what to do. We were paralyzed. 2 months later, the CEO published a letter of apology and instituted a $50,000 damage insurance policy. And they created a 24-hour-a-day support line, hired more people, and the CEO provided their own email address for urgent problems. So his point was, we weren't prepared for the crisis. We dropped the ball. Now we're dealing with the consequences. And it kind of took them 2 months to resolve it. At the end, stop sharing, pause share, I think. So in the end, EJ, the host, was okay with things, because the person was, well, I guess she wasn't okay, because it was a very, very personal crime, but she was satisfied to a point 2 months later, because the person had been arrested and they apologized and they changed their policies. Can you think of any other times where you've heard of a crisis that wasn't handled ahead of time? Can you think of a crisis where it took them a long time, the company a long time to react? Besides the one I mentioned? Okay. Well, can you just understand these days why it's important to do it right away? Why it's important to have a response plan? If nothing from that example is clear, except doing things sooner rather than later is best. At least just give me a thumbs up if you understand why these days, with social media, with people reposting things, you understand why you need to respond to crises right away. You can't assume that that they won't happen, or you can't assume that they'll go away. Any thumbs up? No thumbs up? Epic Games. Oh, good. What happened at Epic Games, Kagan? What, did you want to just give an outline? I'm kind of Googling it at the moment. Oh, so McDonald's spilling a coffee on a lady in a drive-through. Um, that's an old one, and that was a weird one. I don't know if you remember that. Maybe in the 90s, someone in the United States, probably in Florida or California, they went through the drive-through window. They got coffee from McDonald's. They poured. They accidentally spilled it on themselves, and then they got burned, and then they sued McDonald's for having hot coffee. That's why all the drive-through coffee at Tim Hortons and McDonald's, it says caution hot on it. And they sued McDonald's. And so, Hayden, did you hear what actually happened to that woman? Like why, the reason why she was spilling coffee on herself? So anyways, it's a bit of, it was like kind of like one of those, can you believe this stories? But um, she had put the coffee in between her legs while she was driving, and she was trying to pour like bourbon into the coffee. And that's why she had the accident. So it wasn't like coffee was inherently dangerous. Okay. So Kayan's saying the company does, yeah. So she had it in between her legs. She was driving. She was pouring liquor into the coffee, and that's how she spilled it. And that's how McDonald's was um, sort of acquitted of not having to pay her a big settlement, or at least they on appeal it was dismissed. But we still see, hey, caution hot on all of the coffee. So Kyan says the company doesn't respond well to people who play their games. So how does that make you feel when they don't respond well? Probably makes you feel like they don't care, like, oh, Fortnite's doing great, but they don't remember it only does great because they have customers. And sometimes it can be maybe passwords get leaked out, like they get hacked, and then private information and passwords get hacked. That can be a possible crisis as well. So if you're Epic Games, you should have like a plan. What would you do if someone's password got hacked? What would you do if there was an in-app, if they purchased something but it didn't quite work out? What would you do if the game kept freezing? What if someone was bullying and intimidating someone online? Yeah, it makes you not want to play their games because it's not fun. So if Epic Games was a model company, they'd have like kind of a script, a plan for all of those. So if you were unsatisfied, they'd say, well, maybe here's a credit to, for a small amount. Here's a $25, $50 credit. Or they could come and apologize right away, or they could tell you what they're going to do. Or if they plan ahead, they're less likely to disappoint customers like Kayan, who come forward with legitimate complaints and then feel that they're not being listened to. And oops, sorry again, just gotta improve my Zoom skills. I want to go back to that presentation. Yeah, okay, so we saw Apple use the location of a terrorist phone to find him, but people were worried about their privacy. This is a bit of a tragic story. Someone used the Find My iPhone in London, Ontario after their phone had been stolen, and they went to go confront the person who stole it, and they were either stabbed or shot. So yeah, something like that, like people worried about that an iPhone user died, or people worrying that the Find My iPhone feature, like it's great if you leave your phone under the sofa, but it might have this unintended consequence to it, that could be concerning. Okay, so where is my Sorry, I guess I opened up my just my little search window for Epic Games where I had the slides open, so I'll just go back to the start. And so I think now Airbnb learned their lesson. And hopefully they're going to take proactive steps. So some of the proactive steps they've announced, like, so they posted this handwritten apology. Now they have a safety policy and monitoring the app for suspicious activity. Like that could be someone who always books one night visits in the same city. Like, for example, in Toronto, if someone was always doing one night visits on Friday night, they're probably having a party house. They've posted their safety tips online. You can get a verified profile and people can look up your history and be like, oh yeah, this person, they rented a place in New York City, then they rented a place in San Francisco, then they rented a place in Vancouver. I can see they're kind of this recreational traveler. And then you can sort of set your own trust settings. So if a person doesn't meet your reliability level, it doesn't let them book your apartment. However, that's obviously not the last Airbnb crisis. Here's a short clip of one that happened last Halloween in California.
New video showing the chaotic moments after gunfire broke out at a Halloween party, sending people running for cover.
And Airbnb taking action following that deadly shooting, how the company plans to ban party houses. Thank you for joining us. I'm Juliette Goodrich.
I'm Brian Hackney. Tonight, we've obtained new surveillance video from the night of the shooting that left 5 people dead. It happened at an Airbnb rental, a 4,000 square foot house on Lucille Way in Orinda, just south of Highway 24.
KPIX 5's Daw Lynn is live outside that home with the new video. Daw.
That's right. And neighbors have been dropping off flowers and cards at that makeshift memorial right there. They want to show their support to the victims. And victims, including the partygoers, had no idea how dangerous that party was. We now know there were at least 4 guns at that Halloween party.
Okay, so
the surveillance footage shows
it does say sharing's paused. Is this resume share? Is that a bit better? Okay. I'll go and figure that out before I show the video in another, before I show another video in the future. But just, you can get the idea. And the idea being, 5 people were killed at a party. If you're Airbnb, you can't, you can't predict that 5 people will die, but you could predict that something like this should happen. So this is something that still happened within the last year or so. So there was a party in Orinda. I think it's kind of near, I want to say San Francisco, but I might have mixed it up with Los Angeles. 5 people were killed at the party. There were lots of noise complaints. By the time the police arrived, the shooting had already occurred. So this is the latest thing that has happened. With thousands of rentals happening daily, it's no surprise that strange events occur. What should Airbnb do about something like this, about a party house where 5 people died? Any thoughts? Any suggestions? I apologize for the video, but I think you could still get the idea. Okay. So banning party houses, that's a step they could do, right? They could say, if you've rented one and a party has occurred, you can be banned for life or something. They could say, if we find on, if there's too many noise complaints, maybe you get, banned or you get fined. You say, we can share your information with the police. You could encourage people, maybe, what if they said, we recommend all of our hosts have a video in the living room so they can see if any strange activity is happening. Is that a good step or a bad step? Would you be concerned about that step? Mhm. Yeah, Hayden says it's hard to prevent things like this from happening, because somebody, could have a good rating and then they throw a party what that gets out of hand. Um, Somebody, could sell their profile to someone else. You know, you could be traveling, for a couple of years, build up a good rating, and then you decide you don't want to do it anymore. So you sell your profile to your shady friend who uses it for an open invite party. It's kind of hard to monitor, text messages and direct messages for these party invitations. Um, but mitigating the effects of the bad behavior, yeah, like that's mitigate is a good word for crisis management, like minimizing the effects. So maybe they encourage, hosts like, look, um, use some common sense here. Uh, don't have your valuables around. Don't, keep your, you know, if have cheap furniture. We only stay for 3 nights or more. They could maybe give people some tips on that. And I think um, one good step about crisis management is showing empathy. So anytime that something like this happens, you want to sort of apologize, take ownership for it, sympathize with the person who was affected. So other suggestions. Okay, so one thing that can happen with social media is that a lot of people, they want content on the social media accounts, but then the person, shares the password and then the company's account gets hacked. This happened a couple of days ago. The National Health Service in Nightingale, as a hospital in London, they had been posting official announcements about COVID-19, but someone hacked them and posted this fake graphic using the BBC, stationery. It looked like it was a news report, but it was really a fake story. So instead of telling everyone your Instagram or your TikTok password, a company should use Hootsuite, Sprout Social, or HubSpot as kind of that way there's just one password that goes out. So if you need to change it, instead of going to 5 different social media platforms to change it because someone let it out, you just have to go to one place. So it's actually more likely that employees will give out the password by mistake than someone maliciously hacking people. Sometimes inappropriate posts, people don't understand what they're doing. So having a social media policy so people know, hey, no personal posts on the company account, or don't release customer information, only talk about the brand in this way. So having like some guidelines so that people know what's acceptable and isn't is a good step. 34% of managers found online content that caused them to fire someone or discipline them. So sometimes people just don't know. So you think, oh, these privacy guidelines are unnecessary, but actually a lot of people don't know. Okay, someone was in the chat, but yeah. They could, yeah, it could also, backfire, right? You can still get hacked, but it's, again, it's more likely that someone internally does it. And yeah, who was some of the one of the game companies was hacked lately, and some passwords got out there. So it's not that this will never happen, but it minimizes the chance of an accident. It minimizes the chances of this happening. Social listening. apps like HubSpot, Hootsuite, Buffer, ZeroFox monitor social media platforms. So a lot of companies will use these apps and then they'll reply to people before they start complaining. Like they try to find the person who went to the store and had bad service and try to make things right away. Oh, we're sorry to hear that. Like here's a, like contact us, we'll take care of it. They try to be proactive before it gets reposted 1,000 times. On a basic way, you can make a Google alert for yourself. If you go to google.com or google.ca/alert, you can create an alert for your name. And whenever your name is entered in an article, it sends you a message. And that's kind of a basic way that you can keep track of what are people saying about me. So that's the most basic step that a company should do. But you can also use these apps to sort of listen so that companies monitor how people are talking about them and they try to intervene as soon as they can. And just having a plan. So Doubletree Portland, they arrested some people in the lobby, kind of like that Starbucks situation, and it blew up on social media. But then they had some scheduled posts like wishing people Merry Christmas. And the scheduled posts went out. And then people replied to the Merry Christmas one, well, like, I'm not going to your hotel because I'll just be arrested. So, stopping the scheduled posts, like replying to people, but don't argue with them. Don't debate it. Kind of be like, yeah, you're right. We're responsible. We'll fix it. That's kind of a good communication plan. Let people in the company know. So we would, if Kayan in our company was the one who's responding to crisis, he'd let Hayden and Olivia and Kennedy and Alex know that he's taking care of it, so they wouldn't feel like they had to do something. So we'd say, okay, this crisis is happening, here's the designated person who's in charge, everyone address that particular person. We don't want everyone in the company independently doing it. We want kind of a plan so that everyone understands what's happening, and if you can be quicker, that's great. And then as a last video, if you want to read about Starbucks and how they dealt with their washroom issue, they ended up making it available for everyone. They closed their stores for half a day for an afternoon to have additional training. And Howard Schultz made an announcement saying how he was personally responsible and it was his fault. That was a pretty good way to diffuse the situation as much as possible. So that would be an example. This short video would show how Starbucks resolved a situation like that. So that was my point today about crisis management. So we mentioned a couple of apps. We mentioned some crises that have happened and good solutions. I think be prompt about it, engage, but don't argue. And, have a plan ahead of time are some of the best strategies. So I'm getting another friend to come on Friday's class at 1 o'clock to talk about their filmmaking career. His name's Andrew Gregg. He, I met him when I was coaching his daughter, but he's done a lot of documentaries for The Passionate Eye, for CBC. So if you have any questions about filmmaking, you can, I put a little poll in the classroom, or you can ask them in the chat window. So hopefully these experts are enjoyable. So that's sort of our next class. And, again, I'm going to start marking the case studies at the end of the week. And again, if you need a culminating, I made sort of a suggested one out there. I don't know. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or concerns? Okay. I went a little overtime. I apologize. If you have any one-on-one questions, just hang out in the chat room. And then on Friday, we'll have that filmmaker come in and talk about technology in his job.